بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد
وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our studies of moral philosophy from an Islamic perspective. Inshallah, we will follow the same order of the issues that I mentioned in the last session. But as there was a question, and also maybe it would be useful for everyone to review what we discussed in the first year of Hawza about different types of studies of akhlaq and what is meant by moral philosophy in contrast to science of akhlaq. So I start with that. Those who write on ethics, they say there are three types of studies of ethics. Sometimes it's just a matter of studying what ethical opinion or practice of a person or a group is. For example, you want to know what was the ethical code that a certain nation had, a certain tribe had or has. What do Eskimos, for example, believe about right and wrong? What, for example, people in certain country believe or practice in their moral behavior. This is called descriptive ethics. Descriptive ethics. Here, you are not judging. You are not saying this is good or this is bad. Their idea is right or their idea is wrong. I don't agree with them. For example, you are talking about southern states in the United States before the Civil War who believed that slavery was good. You just try to study it, bring evidence, but it's not a matter of whether what's right or wrong. You agree or you don't agree. This is called descriptive. Means you just describe. Your role is to come to the best account, the best explanation of something. Okay? The second type of study is normative ethics. Normative ethics is not interested in describing what certain individuals or certain nations or cultures believe or practice in akhlaq. They try to say whether this action, this practice, this quality is good or bad. For example, is abortion good or bad? Right or wrong? And it can start with a question about one action, but it can go on further. General question, what makes an action good? What makes an action bad? What is your theory of ethics? And here, in normative ethics, we want to evaluate, we want to judge. We are not happy here by just bringing evidence that this person or this group believe in this way. You want to say, yes, no matter what they believe, is it right or not? This is called normative ethics. And the reason it is called normative, because it's trying to give us norms. In English, there is a difference between normal and normative. What's the difference between normal and normative?
Normal is which is considered as standard, or but normative is something in which you define what is the actual norm.
So normal means something which is compatible with the norms. But normative is something that gives the norm. It's very much different. What's the difference between normal and ordinary?
Normal, again, like you said, it's compatible with norm. Ordinary could be just ordinary as not excellent or not bad.
Ordinary means common. Something is common. Normal means something which is compatible with the norms. Maybe something is ordinary but not normal. If you want to speak carefully. So for example, maybe in a society, not to keep your promises is ordinary. But it's not normal. Unless they have such a norm that you don't need to keep your promises. I don't think there is a society that says that you shouldn't keep your promises. So as long as they believe that you should keep your promises, not to keep, it's not normal. Even it might be ordinary. You understand the difference between ordinary and normal. But normative is even more than normal. Normative is what gives the norm. So normative ethics is trying to judge. Then we have what we call analytic ethics or meta-ethics. Analytic ethics or meta-ethics is to go even further. In descriptive ethics, we were just reporting. In normative ethics, we were trying to come up with criterion for what is right, what is wrong. In meta-ethics, we go further. What is the meaning of good and bad? What's the meaning of right and wrong? How you come to understand these concepts? How you can argue in akhlaq? Do we have moral intuition or not? Can we argue from ease for out or from out for ease? Is there ethical relativism or not? What is the relation between ethics and religion or other sciences? These are all meta-ethics. And meta means after. Means after you are engaged with ethics, these questions come up. So we have three major types of ethical studies. Descriptive, normative, ethical studies, analytic ethical studies, or you can say analytic ethics, or meta-ethics. It has two names. Which of these three are considered as moral philosophy? Pardon? Exactly. Although some people have mentioned the first, but the first is not moral philosophy because you are not doing any intellectual, rational argumentation. You, as a historian or as a person who reads the text, interviews people, does field study, you collect information. Yeah? How can you collect information about ethical system of a person or a group. You interview, you live with them, you ask them to fill the questionnaire, you monitor. So this is not philosophy. Philosophy is to use intellectual argument and reasoning. So the first is excluded, although some try to mention, but no, we don't accept. The second and the third are considered as moral philosophy, although some people have only applied it to the third. So certainly the third, but we think even the second, if you argue rationally. For example, if you say why abortion is right and you argue rationally, this is moral philosophy. But if you just bring text, then this is not moral philosophy. This will be descriptive. So, what about studying moral or ethical system of a religion? For example, Islam, Christianity. Does it fall under descriptive or normative or analytic ethics? If you want to say Islamic ethics believes this is the criterion for right or wrong. It depends on approach. If you argue for it rationally, then it can be moral philosophy. And it would be either related to the second or to the third. But if you just refer to religious texts or religious scholars and take their statement as the only source without bringing rational argument, so it is good, but then it would be limited to the people who have already accepted their authority. Okay? This is for any group or religion. If someone says, for example, I am a Buddhist and I believe in this moral principle because Buddha said this. If they rationally argue for it, then they can enter into moral philosophy. If they don't argue for it, then it is descriptive ethics. And what they need to do is to make sure that this is actually said by Buddha. And this is meant by Buddha. So anyone who believes in teachings of Buddha would accept it. But this is not yet moral philosophy. Okay? So, we can have two types of ethical studies in Islam. We can have Islamic moral philosophy, and we can have Islamic moral science or science of akhlaq. If it is moral philosophy, we should engage with other moral philosophers, address the same issues, bring arguments, counter arguments, maybe we agree, maybe we disagree, maybe we partially agree. Everything is philosophy. But if you want to say this is what Islam says based on the text, based on the early sources, for example, or secondary sources, then it would be ilm al-akhlaq, which is a kind of descriptive ethics. Okay? So sometimes we as a Muslim can do moral philosophy. Sometimes we as Muslim can do science of morality. These are two different things. If you have seen my book, Ethical Relativism, which is my PhD, if you remove my name, then you don't know whether this is written by a Muslim or not. Some people may say, oh, such a, bad thing. if you remove his name, we don't see any impact of Islam. But I think actually this is positive, because I try to enter into an ocean that not only Muslims swim, but other human beings also can swim. That's the ocean of philosophy. But my book, Lessons on Islamic Morals, it's all based on the Quran and Hadith. So depending on what's your aim and who are the people you want to interact with them, you have to decide. Philosophy is a very good vehicle, it's a very good tool, because it broadens the benefit to people who are not necessarily believing your religion or your mazhab. But of course, at the same time, there is a limit in what you can do philosophically. When you go into religious literature, there is a depth and, lots of information, lots of details, lots of subtle points. That's very difficult to argue rationally, and sometimes impossible, because reason cannot argue for particular things. Juz'i. Philosophers say, al-juz'iyyu la yakunu kasiban wa la muktasaba. What does it mean? Al-juz'iyyu la yakunu kasiban wa la muktasaba. Means a particular concept can neither be used as a middle term to come to something else, nor can be come at by using a rational argument. So it cannot serve as a proof, and it cannot be proved. So for example, any philosopher, even the greatest philosopher of the world, of the history, ask him, please philosophically tell me how many people are in this room. There's no way. Because this is a particular thing. You cannot prove particular thing by philosophy. So, philosophy has advantage, but also has limitations. I don't know if you have heard this story. They say there was a meeting between Ibn Sina, Avicenna, and one of the mystics, I think it was Abu Sa'id Abul Khair, if I'm not mistaken. And afterwards, there was a kind of question, how did you find the other person? And the overall conclusion is that they both move towards the same destination. It's almost the same direction. But Avicenna tries to walk by using a stick, like a blind person who is step by step walking carefully. But the mystic is the one who is seeing and running. Yes. Of course, we are not talking about particular people. We are not judging about who is a real mystic, who is not a real mystic. But basically, this is the idea. With philosophy, you can walk firmly and correctly, but it's difficult with philosophy to run, let alone to fly. But you can make sure that you are on the right path. With Irfan, you can run and maybe even you can fly, but maybe in a wrong sky. So you need both. Be a mystic who is equipped with philosophy, Be a bird who flies but has navigator of philosophy. That's, I think, the best way. This is what we see in Imam Khomeini, Allama Tabatabai, and this tradition of ulama. So, we can have science of akhlaq, we can have falsafatul akhlaq, ilmul akhlaq and falsafatul akhlaq. Ilmul akhlaq is descriptive, falsafatul akhlaq is either normative ethics or analytic ethics, because it's based on reasoning and arguing. Then, when you deal with moral issues, sometimes you are dealing with theory, sometimes it is applied. So we have theory of ethics and we have applied ethics. Theoretical ethics or theory of ethics is you develop a theory about morality. What is right, what is wrong, this type of things. Who is going to benefit, who is, for example, to be avoided, so on and so forth. But applied ethics is another thing. And this is a new terminology. Nowadays, there are many books on applied ethics. What is applied ethics? Applied ethics means that we define for ourselves a realm of ethical issues which are very closely connected, which share similar principles and rules, and we try to come up with a holistic and interwoven ethical understanding of that field. Did you get what I said?
No.
Because every word I said was important. Yeah. Sometimes you just ask an ethicist a question, a moral question. What should I observe in a speech? Should I always tell the truth, or don't I need to always tell the truth? Or sometimes it is wrong to tell the truth if it endangers, for example, innocent life. So this is a particular question you ask. Another time you ask something about abortion. Another time you ask something about, for example, organ donation. Different things. Another time about business, for example, about fair trade. So, these are applications of ethical theory to different questions. But this is not called applied ethics. This is application of ethical theory to different questions. Applied ethics is when we choose for our study an area that falls under the same principles and similar rules. For example, issues related to the relation between doctor and patient. Medical ethics. Issues related to the issues of life and death. Bioethics. Issues related to environment ethics or environmental ethics. Issues related to business. So you try to identify an area, a field of ethics, and then come up with a holistic and interwoven understanding. If I want to give you an example that helps a lot, like fiqh. A mujtahid, if it's mujtahid mutlaq, okay, if it is not mujtahid mutajazzi, you remember mujtahid mutlaq and mutajazzi? Mujtahid mutlaq can do ijtihad in every question, but mujtahid mutajazzi only in certain aspect. If someone is mujtahid mutlaq, you can ask him a question about wuzu, you can ask him a question about salat, about fasting, about hajj, about judgment, and he goes to the sources and finds out the answer. This works. But it's much better if a faqih works on a section of fiqh, like Kitab al-Tahara, and tries to come up with a holistic understanding of the issues related to Kitab al-Tahara. And by going back and forth from fiqh to the sources, to the hadith, to the rijal, to what other scholars said, he would master this section. Then if you ask him a question about tahara, it's very much different from someone who is mujtahid. But just you ask him one-off question about tahara, and he goes and does one-off ijtihad. You understand the difference? The big difference. Why in fiqh we try to, for example, in Dars al-Kharij, or when ulama write books, we go kitab by kitab, section by section, because every section can have its own internal techniques. Which qawaid fiqhiyya apply here? What is the source? What was the, for example, the view of the Sunni brothers? What is the view of Shia? What was the condition of taqiyya? History of this? What are the hadiths here? There are lots of details that, unless you really focus on this for some time, you would not get it. And it would also save you lots of time and energy. Because if you want for every mas'ala do all these things, you need to repeat again and again. This is why it has been our tradition that ulama normally write, before even Risala or after Risala, they write essays on certain issues which are related to each other. So applied ethics is like this. You can be an expert on ethical theory, but still it's better you don't make any judgment about a particular case unless you take that case and similar case, all issues of one field together, and for some time study it, and then make a presentation. Like bioethics, environmental ethics, information technology ethics, business ethics, media ethics. So this is called applied ethics. So what, inshallah, we want to do is we want to address issues that are related to normative ethics and meta-ethics. We will use arguments developed by Muslim philosophers of ethics, but we use them rationally, not just by quotation. You would not say, this great scholar said this, so we have to accept it. Because we are not after descriptive ethics now. We are after moral philosophy. So if this is clear, now inshallah we can move on to the first thing that we want to discuss, and that is about moral concepts. Maybe we give a little time for break, and then inshallah we continue. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.